It's about 10 minutes. Since this is critical of medical staff, I want to begin with saying thank you to medical staff, especially for those who are serving in Palestine and those serving internationally. This takes a brief look at the historic and ongoing experiences of colonized peoples, receiving terrible and unjust medical treatment in Canada and the United States. After my surgery, I donated my pain medication to an organizer on the east side. I knew she would be able to gift it to somebody who needed it far more than I did. It was a very rare moment I had to offer solidarity in the struggle of chronic pain and gendered mistreatment from the medical field. I've had many queer, femme, and colonized people sharing stories of being mistreated and gaslit by nurses and doctors. Before going in for my surgery, I asked people to share a story of when the medical field in North America had failed them. And that post got a little under 300 comments in 2 days. A body of data had bloomed before us. I asked men to take a look through these stories and bear witness. Story after story laid bare of marginalized people's suffering immensely from the medical field. But why? Why do so many queer folks, femme folks, and colonized people get horrible treatment? There are a few answers. I discussed this with a 32-person solidarity brigade in Cuba. I've discussed it with a Black doctor who worked in my nation for 20 years and one Native doctor. During the goodbye event that we hosted for that doctor, Dr. Lori-Ann Shear, the MC asked people to stand up if she had treated them. The gathering was in our big house, and nearly everyone inside stood up. When asked to stand if she helped you deliver your baby, more than 30 people stood up. The full event was beautiful and it went for 2 hours. A very short event for us in the Celtic Nation. It was mostly gentle and teary and full of love, but there was something important to collectively address. The people in the room and people on Facebook were granted permission to leave a comment or question to be asked and read out loud. Love poured forth from both the room and our community members online who were unable to be there physically, from either being economically pushed to the city or their health preventing them from being there. When most of the questions and commenters were done, I went up and shared what I felt heavy but important to include. And that was that her contributions were great, and it was important to talk about why and the gravity of why her contributions were so great. I mentioned my above point about the several hundred testimonies to violence suffered from the medical racism, medical misogyny, and medical homophobia. And then I added that we must look at two dark things in order to appreciate Dr. Shear's efforts even more. With the police, we see many bad people gravitate towards the profession in order to gain power over others. But this pattern also happens with nursing, where many people want power over others or drawn to the field for that motivation. And with the cost of medical school, it limits who is able to attend as it becomes increasingly expensive and less accessible to the people. This changes who can work in the field of medicine. This limitation amplifies a pattern with doctors, where doctors who are motivated by status and money to join the field, or doctors who become doctors because their parents were a doctor. In my nation, we would see doctors come and go all the time. A lot of the time we would see them come one time for 2 weeks and never come back. But Dr. Shear had worked there for 2 decades. She was the absolute opposite to doctors who are in it for the status or for the money. Dr. Shear is a doctor for the people. I wanted to say more, but too many tears were flowing. The two of us spoke, and she said, even 20 minutes isn't enough for an appointment. She focuses on person-centered care and remembers people. I wanted to bring up in the city how many doctors just see as many patients as they can per day. During the retirement party of her gala fundraiser, I found out that she wasn't actually retiring and that she was just moving into semi-retirement, where she was going to work with a feminist organization in Vancouver and provide support to them. We teased her that she has to come back to our nation and visit us. We named a street after her. With a Native doctor, I spoke of this to him, and he immediately told me that more than half of his classmates were doctors. With this, we can quickly see that being a doctor runs in families, Some factors are that the parent is pressuring the children to uphold their legacy. Some want their children to have status and money. But the three of these factors are not centering the people. The masses and the marginalized are not the focus in those decisions. Recently, I learned that doctors in Canada lobby deliberately to work to keep the medical field a small, private affair. They gatekeep the medical industry so that it remains a status symbol, and it lets them dictate the conditions that they work in. I would assume nurses and LPNs would be opposed to this, but we have not seen their unions organizing to make education free, to create more medical students, and alleviate the tremendous strain and burnout that so many medical staff report. They've been reporting that this is the highest medical staff burnout that they've seen in decades-long careers. If you want to take a look at the best country for medical education, practice, and solidarity, we can take a look at Cuba. A couple highlights from Cuba. In Canada, pregnant people have 2 checkups with doctors. In Cuba, doctors will come to your home 8 times during a pregnancy to perform medical checkups. Cuba has more than twice as many doctors per capita as anywhere in the world. In addition, they have 32,000 doctors deployed around the world, mostly deployed to Africa and Latin America. The Cuban doctors even attempted to deploy doctors to reserve in Manitoba, but the Canadian government, under Justin Trudeau's administration, declined the visas for these doctors. In the medical field, in the US, they experimented on black femmes and had a terrible relationship with the black community. In Canada, Native women are still being forcibly sterilized in Saskatchewan. And that same phenomena happened with black women in the United States. These settler states have not fostered a good relationship with colonized peoples. This is one reason that reproductive justice for colonized struggles, that this is such a huge fight. The field of gynecology is built on medical testing on African American women without their consent. So the entire foundation for the medical field of that field is built on misogynoir. On a lighter note, shout out to Facebook and memes. For Vietnamese folks, Filipino folks, Indian, Native, Black, Puerto Rican, and many others, I'm guessing, there are memes about 7-Up, ginger ale, and Vicks being the medicine of our people. Now this may be the silliest thing that I have said in months, but these memes are a scientific testimony to our people suffering across millions. They highlight some factors, namely that we do not often have doctors in our area, that we cannot afford to visit the doctors in our area, or that we cannot trust the doctors in our area, so that we are forced to resort to alternatives. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the ongoing state efforts to wage war against women's rights, there is not women's autonomy or sovereignty of their own bodies. This Catholic and evangelical effort to oppress women and build a hierarchical system is powerful at creating dependence on men. This recreates the ruling class relationship to the working class, between men and women broadly. This dynamic of inequality is also applied to the children, who have the least autonomy and influence of all. I do not expect doctors to understand Marxist feminism, but I think a fair message for us to understand and then uphold is that the medical staff in our continent are massively overworked, and the capitalist, Catholic, and Protestant ideology has made them proud of their hard work, their struggles, and it makes them not question and fight the conditions as they are. If we are proud of our efforts, we center ourselves, then we are not focused on the stories, testimonies, and experiences of others. The burnout and pride of suffering of medical staff working 16-hour shifts is huge in the why of why colonized peoples experience such horrible medical care. But that is still not the main problem. The hardest fight that we need to wage on this topic is the struggle to get free education for all, so that we can flood the medical field with staff. Colonized peoples can serve our people better than colonists can. We need our current medical staff to apply their Hippocratic oath and fight at the systemic level by organizing to get education for all. The white savior complex of personally doing your best to alleviate guilt must be replaced by a revolutionary dedication to the people, by committing oneself to justice for all. This embrace marks something. You will no longer do bits and pieces and move on while shying away as the river injustice flows. You will join us in the unrelenting fight for a better tomorrow, a call to internationalism. The heartbeat of the masses and being in harmony with the people will dispel the alienation and let you fight harder and love deeper. I would also like to add that women in Gaza are giving birth without anesthetic and that they are facing the worst violence in the world when it comes to reproductive struggles. From what I have seen, our Palestinian family are the only people who have bigger families than natives of this continent. Imperialism, capitalism, and settler colonialism stand as titans in the institutional oppression against colonized peoples, in settler states here and against our family in other countries. All of our struggles are connected, and that's something that we must always keep close to our hearts. All my relations, thank you for your time.